realtor now for close to 12, 13 years now. I started in the business back in 2012. Over the past 12 years, I pretty much dedicated myself to the Miami market here in South Florida. And over the past, I want to say, 6 years or so, right around before the pandemic, is when my practice and I started focusing more into condos and specifically also in new development, which is what I'm going to be discussing today. I know that everyone's time is valuable, so I'm not going to provide a lot of fluff. Today's presentation, more than anything, is designed to give each and every one of you some very specific tips and some very specific practices that I have put into place in my business over the past couple of years that have given me a certain degree of victories and success in this realm. We all know that we are in a very competitive real estate environment, so anything that you can take from today that can enhance your business, I will call that mission accomplished. A little bit more background into my practice as well. I would say 80% of my business is condos. So this will be a condo-driven new development Zoom session. I am going to explain some of the differences between what will be new and pre-construction on single family versus condos. And that will be for those who maybe have experience with new development, but not necessarily with the condo realm, which is a big portion of our pre-construction market here in Miami, and also our luxury real estate market. So for those that might be wondering why it might be important or why it might be worth looking into new development and incorporating in your business, my reasons at the time in which I started 6 years ago, I saw it first of all as an opportunity to enter the luxury real estate market. We all know that our land is getting more expensive, so a lot of the new construction that we're seeing now in our market areas is going to now be properties that are over $1 million or in excess or possibly in the millions of dollars. I don't have data in front of me at the moment, but I think a ballpark for 2024 at the time of this recording, we might be looking at close to a minimum of maybe $1,000 a foot for the urban areas of downtown Miami and Miami Beach, all the way to up to $3,000 a foot for some of the more higher end projects, such as the Four Seasons in Coconut Grove, the Mandarin Oriental in Brickell, just to name a few. I will say, even if it's not your main focus, or even if the goal is not to make it your main focus, you will be a more rounded real estate professional if you work in areas where these projects are getting built. The reason being, you're going to want to know what's going to get built out there. Many of my colleagues might specialize in single family in areas where there's plenty of single family inventory. They will still know what's getting built in that area just so that they can come across as a local real estate expert. So those were some of my reasons. Last but not least, just to address the elephant in the room, because of the price points that we're discussing, it can be also a very lucrative segment of the real estate market. And if you become an expert at it, and if you do it really well, chances are that you can actually make your practice very lucrative. You can make a lot of money and you can reach a lot of new success as a real estate agent. These are 3 examples of some projects that I would say I have worked with in the past. I want to start with the one on the left-hand side. This is Art the Surfside. This is a boutique project that was built and completed, I want to say, right around 2020, 2021 in Surfside. It was actually designed by Antonio Citerio. He's an architect very well known in Italy, who's actually now designing 1428 Brickell, another pre-construction project that's getting sold as we speak. Over in the middle, we have Brickell Flatiron, which was also completed in 2020. This was designed by Luis Revuelta and developed by CMC, which is both it's a local architect and also a local developer, well-known local architect and developer based in downtown Miami. It's got 549 units, and I would say personally, I think it's actually one of the best of the newer projects that have come into Brickell recently. And last but not least, we have Waldorf Astoria, which is getting built in downtown as we speak. It's going to be one of several proposed super tall buildings getting built in our skyline. It's designed to be up to 1,049 feet. And I believe as we speak, it's already over 50% sold and it's already going vertical. So to jump with the first tip and the first suggestion, I want to talk first about the on-site agent. Now, I am a general practitioner. I'm basically have the freedom to work with any project that I want. I can choose not to work with a project. The on-site sales agent, it's a bit of a different role. This is going to be your biggest advocate for whichever project you might be looking into. Your goal, or at least what I have seen as my goal when working in new development, you're going to want to meet the teams that are representing these projects and find the person that you believe will be the best fit based on how you personally work as a realtor. The role of that agent is quite simple. He or she basically has to get to know you, educate you on the project, and that person, whomever it might be, also has the important responsibility of being an expert on anything regarding what that project is, when it's going to be built, who's building it, what the prices are, what the floor plans are. And their goal ultimately is going to be to get them to get you to talk about their project and for you to bring your customers to that project. So be very careful in regards to the projects that you choose. And I think that when it comes to the on-site agent, the same applies. But thankfully, these are, at least in my experience, these agents are very professional. They are not rookies. They know exactly how to do their job. And ultimately, what you want to do is you want to reach a state of harmony between yourself and that development by finding an agent on site that's going to advocate. It's going to keep you informed regarding the project, and ultimately it's going to help you present and give you as much information as you need to determine if that project is going to be the right fit for your customers. Now, I've given this a lot of thought, especially with some of the changes that we're seeing obviously in our marketplace. I strongly believe that despite the fact that some people might think that buyers can still go directly to a development and just simply work with them directly, I will say that there is still a huge role as a general practitioner when it comes to new development. And I actually will go as far as saying that representation is probably very important, more than ever, in regards to making sure that your buyer is protected, which ultimately is our goal as realtors. Every project is going to be very different, and projects, just like some sellers, are going to be, their goal is to make money. Their goal is to build a project, whereas as a buyer's agent, your goal is to make sure that your customer is protected. That's the number one job that you have as a realtor. So some projects might have variances. Some projects might have something that might obstruct their view. If it's a project, let's say near the water. So it's very important that you, more than anything, understand that when it comes to new construction, it's not easy to go out there and sell it. But most importantly, it could be very easy to present it without knowing that this might not be the right project to suit the needs of that specific customer. One perfect example that I can provide is Brickell. I'm not going to give names on certain towers, but as we all know, Brickell is a high density neighborhood. This is a neighborhood where more and more buildings are getting torn down and being replaced by taller towers. Some towers could be office buildings. Some towers are going to be mixed use residential buildings. And the view that you thought would have been possibly unobstructed for years to come, there's a good chance that that view might not be there for the next couple of years. So misrepresentation could be huge. So it's very important that you do as much due diligence as you can before you bring buyers out to your specific projects.
Hey, Marcelo,
Now,
can you
yeah,
by chance move do you see the Miami Realtors insignia?
yes.
Can you by chance move that? I'm unable to do it. I think it's coming from your screen. People are saying that it's blocking. Yeah, there we go. Or yeah, now if you could, I don't know if you can completely reduce it or
Unfortunately, I don't think so, Kevin.
all right, that's fine.
But I'll see what I can do. Hang on. I think that might be a little bit better.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, wonderful. So
Thanks.
going back to it, this is probably the most important slide. Contracts in new development are not like the assets farboard contract that you're going to use when helping a buyer purchase or resell, whether that's an existing condo or a single family. These contracts are typically written by the attorneys that are actually representing the developers. They could be 50 pages long, maybe longer, if you also include the different addendums. So even if the buyer has already bought new development before, which is very common, it's pretty much standard practice to go ahead and recommend that buyer that he or she speaks to an attorney, so that that attorney can not necessarily tear apart the contract, but annotate and prepare what's called a side addendum, which is designed to supersede any clauses in the standard contract that that attorney or the buyer is opposed to being mentioned. The second reason why you want to have an attorney is because the language on these contracts can be very legally driven, whereas in my opinion, the FAR contracts are designed to be very easy to read, and the terms don't necessarily tend to, again, in my opinion, favor one party over the other, whereas these contracts tend to really favor the developer towards keeping as contingencies as aggressive as possible regarding the buyer, but also waiving a lot of liability in regards to the builder's responsibilities. So things like the estimated closing date could be negotiable. Things like the deposit structure could be negotiable. But most importantly, you also have to remember that if your buyer in particular is looking to purchase with financing, chances are this contract is also not making those deadlines contingent upon the buyer getting financing. So not to do the job of the attorney that's representing any of your buyers or any of my buyers, but this is exactly why you want to make sure that you get an attorney, and in particularly you get a real estate attorney that is familiar with the purchase contracts that are used here in Florida. Thankfully, you do have 15 days right to cancel. That's pretty standard on most new construction contracts. So buyers do have the ability to walk away with a very good amount of time before signing. But with that said, what you want to do is get the attorney for the buyer and the attorney for the developer in touch, in communication, so that anything that needs to be resolved is put in writing, along with any incentives or any concessions that are also being added as part of the negotiation. So if any of you have worked in new construction or pre-construction for single family, the biggest difference between single family and condos is that unlike a single family community where the developer, let's take an example, Lennar, will sell by phases or will go street by street, and it's one lot after the other. On condos, and particularly on development condos, developers need to have a minimum of properties already under contract with a minimum amount of units with deposits before you want to start going vertical and do what's called the groundbreaking of the condo. That number is going to vary. That number is going to be different depending on the project. It's going to vary depending on who the developer is. Some developers feel very confident and will start building and groundbreaking with less than maybe 30% of those units under contract. Usually that's not recommended. I think anybody with experience in development knows that you're going to want to have more units under contract. The golden number and the number you want to keep in mind when meeting these developments is anywhere between 35 to 50%. If you have about 35% or more units under contract, there's a good chance that the developer not only has broken ground, but is possibly already in the process of getting construction financing so that they can also start building. Anything below that doesn't mean that there isn't a schedule, but it just means that there's a chance that that development is still not ready to begin construction, given the fact that not enough units have gone under contract. So 35 to 50, anything less than that doesn't mean that you shouldn't look at it, but you definitely want to keep a close eye because it just might not be ready. So that buyer needs to understand that until that number is reached, that project might not take off, or that project may not start construction until those numbers are there. Closing costs can be a little bit different. Because it's a condominium, you're definitely expected to see at least 2 months worth of the maintenance fee in contribution at closing. Utility connection fees has to do with fees related to connecting the sewer and the electricity. Those are usually annotated at the contract, but not necessarily disclosed until at closing. It could be anywhere between a couple $100 all the way to $5,000, $4,000. And then developer fees, which is mostly associated to that 1.75% that's charged at closing by the title company, is also going to include the title that's being given at closing. So basically, to keep it short, you want to make sure that the condo has a certain amount of units already under contract. If it's below that, doesn't mean it's not worth looking. For me, it's actually more of a green light that there's a good chance that we can actually negotiate and maybe get additional incentives in regards to the project, but maybe do a little bit more due diligence before getting the buyer to commit. Now, because of the staggering amount of projects, not just in planning process, but also in the stage of construction, or even projects that already are constructed and are now being delivered, you're going to want to have a system to keep this in order. I think that everyone here is probably familiar with Dropbox. What I highly recommend is to prepare one folder that's separate from your regular folders for your regular listings called new development. And what I do to keep things organized is you want to have one folder for each building, and then subfolders that include all of the brochures, all of the marketing materials, all of the fact sheets, all of the floor plans, any media or renderings that are provided to you that can be used, any photography that shows the views of the units, that show what the finishes of the units will look like. Those are going to be helpful because that's what you're going to use in order to present the project to somebody. Unfortunately, unless the building already has a certificate of occupancy, or if it's already topped off, this is how we sell new construction. You're going to, in its essence, you're selling an idea, and you're selling an idea of what the project is going to look like. And the good thing is that most developers and their sales teams are going to give you these tools so that you can succeed and so that you can talk to your buyers, doesn't matter where they are. One good thing about Dropbox is that it's mobile friendly. So if you're able to actually organize this in an efficient way, you can essentially present this anywhere in the world. You can be in a restaurant and you're going to have everything that you need to have an educated conversation with a potential customer that might be interested in a specific project that you have in mind. So you're going to want to hoard all this information. And one additional tip, and this is also if you're a realtor that's interested in doing resales and getting involved in more condos, eventually these new developments are going to become resales. You're going to have buyers that bought from the developer becoming potential sellers. I will say that you will stand out from your competition if you actually are one of the few realtors that keeps the original material from the development at the time the project was getting built. One really good example is I'm one of the buildings that I farm is called Millicento. It's in Brickell. This project is already, I want to say, around 8 or 9 years old. And despite that, I still have all of the folders of all of the material that the developer was using back in the early 2010s to present it. And I will say that I think every single listing appointment I've gotten in that project, I've gotten it because that seller recognizes that I have all of that information saved. Number two, and I think I mentioned it briefly, you're going to want to make sure that you work with an on-site agent and you have a good working relationship with this agent. I'm not saying you necessarily want to become friends with them, but you want to identify who you think is going to be an agent that best resembles your working relationships, your working style, and that is going to effectively keep you informed regarding the project, the progress of the project, and that will be able to also relate to the buyers that you're working with. These agents know what they're doing. If you find the right one, I can assure you, chances are all you have to do during the presentation is just sit back and let them present the product, because this is what they do every day on a daily basis. And your job is simply to be there and make sure that your buyer is protected. Number three, and again, this is where you have to come in as an expert and make these decisions yourself. Some projects are going to be good. Some projects, in my opinion, are not going to be as good. Sometimes they're going to be good, but they're not going to be the right projects for that particular buyer. And then some other projects, and I'm not going to name names, they're not projects that I would ever recommend to anybody. Not even if it's a buyer that comes to me directly asking me for information about this project. Again, not to name any names or things like that, but I think anybody has probably seen a few articles on some of our local newspapers where buyers essentially have gotten in some very bad decisions because of lack of due diligence, because you don't do the proper homework before actually looking into the project or moving forward with the project. So what I highly recommend is get to know, prior to actually seeing the project or visiting the sales center, get to know more about the project itself, where the land is, who the developer is, what has this developer built before, what is the reputation of the buildings that those developers build. If it's a building that, you know, for better or worse, it's not doing so well, or maybe has construction defects, I'm not saying that it's going to doom the potential new project, but it does speak something, at least to me, as to what the upcoming project is going to be and what kind of project I'm supposed to be expecting. In other cases, you're going to see a project that was built by a developer who's maybe been doing this for 30 or 40 years, has built other buildings in Miami. These are buildings that are still around. They're buildings that are still breaking sales records in terms of price per square foot. And this is not an automatic, okay, let's only work with this developer, let's only work with this building. But as a professional that cares about my reputation too, I will always prefer to work with a developer that already has done this before and has their team in place and they know what they're doing. It's going to make it just a little bit easier. So I wouldn't recommend that you become a realtor that basically just presents every single new development project. Start with one or two or three, maybe a few per neighborhood, and try to become an expert on those particular projects while still have the information about the other ones, just in case if developments change and they become more enticing projects, whether the pricing improves or whether they throw in additional incentives that now makes it a very good value proposition for that buyer. So be careful. And in terms of the presentation of the new development, again, once you have all the information from the developer, you can take this to the sky. You can go as far as you want to go with this. You can either do it one-on-one, you can present email marketing if you get the permission from them, which is typically what I do. But some real estate companies and some real estate teams, they actually, once they have the information, even go as far as traveling to foreign countries and going to conferences or setting up conferences where these projects are actually being presented and where they're going out there and actually presenting these as investment opportunities to come live in Miami or to invest here in Miami. So make sure that before you do any of that, you have all of the information that's legally provided by the developer. Your fact sheet is going to become your best friend. You want to make sure that the fact sheet is current. You want to make sure that this is a fact sheet that doesn't have an upcoming revision, since things change potentially on a daily basis. And most importantly, because pricing tends to change as the development continues to go up in stages, make sure that you also get updates regarding the pricing so that you don't misprice the unit, let's say with pricing from earlier this year, and then the pricing is now maybe 10 or 15% more. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I wanted to keep it, short and sweet, but I'm here to answer any questions. And yeah, thank you all for coming. I think that if you are new to this could potentially really change your business for the better, and potentially also give you a new vehicle towards selling products that you haven't sold before.
All right, so there was one question on the chat, Marcelo. It's how can you be sure you're working with an on-site agent? This person gets a lot of emails from different people promoting a development, but how can they verify if they are an affiliate agent or an unaffiliated agent?
Well, usually the fact sheet will include the name of the sales team, even the ones that are unbranded. So I'll give you a perfect example. I'm doing some work at Mandarin Oriental right now. Based on the fact sheet, we know that Fortune is the sales office for Mandarin. If you want to be 100% sure, you can contact the sales office directly, or you can visit the sales center. There's not going to be an agent working in there that's not affiliated with the company, and you just want to look at the fine print and make sure that you're not talking to somebody who's misrepresenting himself or herself as a on-site agent for this project. But long story short, start by finding out who the company is, and based on that, you can identify who's the sales director or who are the assigned sales agents for that project. If push comes to shove, I know that this has been an issue before. Some projects actually sent out emails introducing the sales team so that you know who they are.
Okay, next question. What is the best way to register your customers? What if they are out of town and want a virtual presentation? Do they always need to sign a registration form, or can people register them? Can they be registered by the realtor before presenting the new development to the buyers?
It depends on the project. Some projects will actually require that they are registered before any presentation. Personally, I register them before any presentation, even if it's virtual. Some projects are more casual, and they'll just say, look, just send me an email with the names of the customers, and for them that might be enough. And just because this is leading up to the following, I'm not 100% sure if this is also going to require a buyer's broker agreement before any presentation, but if your broker encourages it, I don't see why that would be an issue, especially considering how much liability could be out there when presenting these products.
Anybody else have any questions? All right. Well, thank you everybody for attending today. This recording will be emailed to you when it becomes available on YouTube. And I will also do my best to get the slides from Marcelo so that I can send it to you when I send out the link.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, if you guys have, I'm still a practicing realtor, so chances are you might see me out there, whether on the listing side or on the buyer side. But, one of my biggest pride and joy is my work aside as a member of YPN and as a board member for the association. So my information, I'll be happy to provide it. If you guys have any particular questions about the projects that I'm presenting or what projects I'm not presenting, I can discuss that more privately. and also just give you a little bit more additional insight as to what to look out for. Just because, these projects are all very different. So every single one has to be treated differently as well.
Okay, one more question did come down. How should realtors proceed when the sales rep of the developer is hesitating giving a number of how many units are under contract? It happened to somebody before, and they were not sure if there's a way to have them disclose that percentage to the buyer.
Yeah, so that question has come up before. I mean, this is one of those situations where they don't have to necessarily disclose this. Some teams and some developments will actually have no issue disclosing that information. Personally, I wouldn't disclose it because obviously there's increments happening on these projects. So it's really up to you and the buyer as to how you feel by not having the information. But at the same time, this is also why I'm a huge advocate to keeping track of the pricing, which is what I typically do on any certain project, in order to see what the trajectory is, which typically tends to be a single digit increase, anywhere between 1 to 4% to even up to 6%, depending on market conditions, but also subject to inflation. But that's what I typically have seen year over year.
Okay, the next question. How would you use the EBBA for commission, incentives, bonuses, and rewards?
What's the EBBA? I'm sorry.
It doesn't say what the EBBA is. The BBA might be buyer's broker agreement.
Well,
Exclusive buyer's broker agreement.
Okay, thank you, Molly. So it's pretty simple. I mean, if I would say, obviously, see what your broker says. I'm going to safely presume that a buyer is a buyer, regardless of whether it's a buyer buying new development or if it's a buyer buying a resale. The key difference, and I think that this is still being discussed or up in the air, don't quote me on this, is that obviously the biggest difference is that I have yet to see a situation where developers are refusing to hand out commission or compensation to an outside broker. On the contrary, I think that the majority are still pretty much being and portraying their commissions. I would say, at least on my side, I'm still recommending every buyer to have the buyer broker agreement signed, but there is a way to make it, to have special clauses, and this is something that I'm still reviewing in my personal business, but it's going to be one of those things where it has to be subject to the terms of the purchase agreement of the contract. I think that's the short answer. I would use the buyer's broker agreement and mention that compensation is subject to the purchase agreement signed between the buyer and the developer.
Somebody asked, how can you get unbranded materials from an inside rep?
Just connect with them, send them an email, reach out to them, let them know that you would like a copy of their Dropbox, or if you can get the material. And if they only send you the branded, which isn't typically the case, all you have to do is just ask them to please also send you the unbranded material, because you're going to use it to market the project.
Excellent. And then somebody asked, do you know of any certifications an agent can take to specialize in this niche market? If so, would you recommend an agent getting the certifications, or where could they take the course?
I'm always going to recommend the CRS, which is not just for new development. It's also going to be for just residential real estate as a whole. I'm going to take a step further. I'm going to be the first to say I don't have any certifications. I think that what has set me apart the most is going to be just my ability to say absolutely not to certain projects, and also just getting familiar with condo financing and condo rules, because that's, I think, has been the biggest differentiator for me, to know which condos I think are bad news and the ones that I think are good news.
And then how are most of these new developments financed?
Well, some projects are funded by private money. So it could be money coming from a billionaire investor from a certain place. Some are some are situations where the actual developer is a billionaire and they're able to self-fund the project. In my experience, even if the developer has deep pockets, they still will typically pursue a construction loan, and a variety of banks out there actually are able to provide those construction loans. Some of them are actually here locally, Bank OCK, City National Bank, Ocean Bank. So these local institutions are out there, and they're, first, they're going to look at the criteria. I think that, the rest, that specific criteria, I think a banker from these institutions will be able to give you more details, but these are they're the ones that are looking at the fine print, looking at the amount of property, the amount of contracts, the amount of deposits, and then underwrite a loan for the developer to then hire a contractor to basically start going vertical.
Awesome. Okay. Somebody asked, what do you look for when you say absolutely not about a certain development?
So absolutely not for me is going to be changes in the branding, sometimes changes in the developers themselves. If I see that work stopped, I usually like to ask why the work stopped. The amount of properties that are under contract also tend to concern me. If I see a project that has been advertised for close to a year and they're only 10 or 15% on their contract, it's not an automatic red flag, but I like to ask why. Typically it comes down to financing, sometimes it's the location. So some of those absolutely nots are just trivial things like the location and what's being presented, and as well as the price. In other cases, they're more personal things. They're things that are more personal to me. Some projects, for example, they don't have parking assigned to the units, but it's right to use, or the parking doesn't come included. I try to stay away from those things just because I think parking is essential in South Florida still. The dollar per square foot on the maintenance fee tends to be a concern to me as well. If I see a project presenting a potential dollar per square foot maintenance fee of over $2.50, I'm gonna want to know what's included, given how high it is. So things that seem to be too good to be true. If it seems like it's all sunshine and rainbows, typically it's not. And also, last but not least, and this is just the unfortunate truth, if it's a first-time developer, I'm going to be careful as well. And it doesn't mean I'm not going to present the project. It just means that I'm probably going to be more careful, and compared to a project that is being built by a developer that has built multiple projects or is currently building multiple projects.
Awesome. Can buyers get mortgages for new development?
You can. You can. The challenge is figuring out who will be willing to finance the project, and most importantly, can you convince the developer to make the deal subject upon financing? Chances are the developer is not going to want to make that subject upon financing, so that's where the buyer has to assume the risk of still being able to come up with the difference at closing. Or if they have the money to still pay cash at closing. But you can, and I have done it before.
Nice. How substantial are the typical discounts for final sale below asking price? Do you see that often?
It depends on the situation. Depends on how well they're selling. I have seen substantial discounts at all times during the project. It's harder to get a discount at the beginning, just because they're usually starting at friends and family pricing or at rock bottom pricing to generate interest. But usually it comes down to the beginning. And I have seen also situations where you can get better discounts at the end once there's TCO, because at that point in time, the developer probably just wants to close up shop and sell the remaining inventory. Not liquidate it, but they will be willing to provide discounts and incentives in order to move forward. Sometimes it's not a price discount. Sometimes they'll offer 1 or 2 years of maintenance fee for free, or other types of incentives.
Got it. Okay. The next question is, do these new development projects end with 10% reserves? And then would there be an assessment at the end?
For the most part, I have seen most projects prepare what's called the estimated budget. And on most of the projects that I have sold, they usually show that they're going to have 10% of reserves. In regards to the assessment, hopefully not, but it depends on what the situation is. Usually, that's having an assessment right after the project is completed is not typical, just because it's a brand new project. Special assessments are usually done to when there's a deficit on a budget, and there's a need for a capital improvement, which is usually due to the building being old.
And then somebody asked, besides NEO, where can they obtain a list of new developments or pre-developments in Miami-Dade County?
My website. No, I'm just kidding. I'm a big fan of NEO. I would say NEO is probably one of the best tools that you can use out there.
So you really, unless somebody compiles a list themselves on their specific website, there's really nothing better than NEO out there.
Correct. And I'm going to go as far as saying NEO is very good, but I personally like to keep my own list on Dropbox, just because that way I'm in control of the data. And also, not that I think anything's going to happen to NEO, but you never know. You don't want to rely on a third party for your information. Just like you don't want to have all of your reviews on one egg. You want to be able to have the data yourself. You want to be the source of the information. So what I usually recommend, and this is I know it's not easy. It's, even if it's a project that you're not 100% sure of, get the information anyways and have it with you on Dropbox, because you never know whether a year from now or 3 months from now you have a buyer interested, or maybe 6 years from now when the project is done, you meet somebody that owns in that building and now wants to sell. Yeah, you're going to have a competitive advantage if you already have that information on your own Dropbox and you don't have to ask for anyone for it.
Okay. The next question is it true that projects will be cheaper to buy at the beginning?
I like to believe so, but it's not necessarily always the case. It depends on the market situation. But yes, usually during the beginning, you're going to have better pricing, because over time, that pricing will be affected by inflation and construction costs. Developers over time naturally start raising prices as the construction goes along. And that's why it's very common to suggest buyers to get in on it at the beginning. But you can get better pricing at any time. It depends on what's going on. It depends on how sales are going. Some of my best deals in the past have actually happened at the tail end when the project is done, just because at that point the building is completed. I can show the buyers the building. I can bring them in. And in some of those situations, to make it more enticing, developers have even turned some certain units into model units and will offer them fully furnished with certain incentives just to get the buyers to say yes.
All right. Well, if there are no more questions, thank you so much, everybody. Wait, there might be another one. Can you provide everybody with your website? Somebody's asking.
Yes, MarceloSteinmander.com. And NEO, it's you can get that from the MLS. I just thought about it. Proxio, I think is worth looking at as well. And in terms of also keeping updated, there's 2 websites that I follow religiously. One of them is the Next Miami, which is, I wouldn't call it they're not gossipy, but they do keep a good tally regarding upcoming projects. The other one is actually called Profile, which is actually, I think one of the people that own it is also a realtor. and they also have done a pretty good job keeping tabs on quite a few different projects as well.
And then somebody asked, what's your favorite luxury development on the beach?
On the beach, I would say I am a huge fan of I mean, this is not pre-construction or anything, but obviously, Apogee down in South to Fifth, and then closer to where I live on the north side. Well, in terms of pre-construction, I would say there's the Rosewood at Hillsborough Beach, which is in Broward County. That might be a little too far north for you, but I'm a huge fan of that project. Further south, I would say, in terms of pre-construction right now, there aren't too many. And well, in Miami Beach, I mean, you really only have the Paragon right now, and it doesn't really have a lot of competition at the moment. They're pretty much kind of like the only one. But further north, I mean, the St. Regis and Sunny Isles, I would say, is really worth the look.
Somebody asked your thoughts on car developments.
On what?
Car developments, like Porsche.
I think it's not a huge fan. I mean, if it's a good building, it's a good building. And for me, the car branding is just a bonus. I like to look at the building based on the architecture and based on the features. If it has an additive incentive of having a branding to it, great. For me, I'm a bigger fan of hospitality brands. So Mandarin Oriental, for example, the Four Seasons, for example, the Ritz-Carlton, just because these projects are going to have the added incentive of being managed by an operator that knows what it is to manage hospitality, luxury accommodation across the world.
I'm a YPN leader. Of course I'm going to be on my laptop.
I'm a YPN leader. Of course I have a full purse.
I'm a YPN leader. Of course I'm eating before I leave.
I'm a YPN leader. Of course I'm sneaking out for showing.
We're YPN leaders.
Of course we're going to be creating content.
I'm a YPN leader. Of course I'm signing up for classes.
I'm a YPN leader. Of course I'm Cafecito obsessed.
I'm a YPN leader. Of course I'm going to crash the next happy hour.
If I find my way home, yeah. Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me? Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me? Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me? Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me? If I find my way home, yeah. If I find my way home, yeah. Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me? Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me? Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me? Wouldn't it be crazy? Oh, don't you still amaze me? If I find my